So Mark Gurman just reported, and we got a bomb, that Apple is actually renaming and completely rebranding all their operating systems from iOS to macOS to VisionOS, watchOS, and skipping pretty much all their naming nomenclature and going straight to 26 to ideally match the year. But what gives? Let's talk about it. So we've been getting a lot of leaks and rumors about what the new operating system of iOS, iPadOS, and macOS is going to look like, and we've heard that it's going to be very inspired by VisionOS, and it's going to be a complete overhaul, very similar to the transition we had from iOS 6 to iOS 7, where we went from this kind of skeuomorphism, where everything kind of looked realistic, to kind of this flat, more kind of minimalistic design of iOS 7. And now we're going to be taking a new approach, going from iOS 18 to what's going to be called iOS 26. I have a comment on what I think is going to be actually named, but the reason they're doing this is to completely kind of rebrand and change up, and then also match up the year to the operating system to make it easier for people to understand what's going on. Because right now, albeit it's kind of confusing, because you do have iOS 18 and iPadOS 18, but then you have macOS 15, you have watchOS 11, so this starts to confuse the regular consumer as to what they're getting, what's the newest one, what's the benefit versus the consequence of going to one versus the other, which one is the latest one. So again, right now, if you're looking at your Mac and you see macOS 15, that's the latest one, but the average person is going to be, hey, why isn't it macOS 18, and why isn't it matching up with iOS 18 and iPadOS 18? So I completely understand why they're doing this. It's just interesting how they're doing it kind of mid-decade, and they're doing it so abruptly and out of nowhere. People have made the argument that Samsung did this similar thing going from the S10 to the S20. My argument there is that at least they kind of like stayed in a subset of 10, so they went from 10 to 20, and it made a little bit more visual and literal sense. But now going from 18 to 26 just looks a little funky to me, in my opinion. But let me know in the comment down below what you think of them changing up the name. But the fact that they are changing up the name all but confirms this new kind of revitalization of the operating system for iOS, macOS, and iPadOS specifically, which will also trickle down to tvOS and watchOS and VisionOS and everything else, including probably this HomeOS that they're creating, which we'll touch on in a little bit. So now, what does this naming structure really mean, and how are they going to change it, and what are they going to sell it as, right? Because I don't actually think Apple's going to be calling it iOS 26, iOS 27 year and year after year. I think they're just going to be calling it the new version of iOS, and then in parentheses, it'll be like the year number. So Apple's going to introduce this as the new iOS, and then parentheses 26. And the reason they're not doing it 25 is because they're taking the same approach that video games take, at least sports video games take, and maybe also car manufacturers take, which is they name it 1 year ahead because they do it in yearly cycles, where in September, the new launch is going to happen. It only has 3 months worth of, 25 or 2025, and then it looks old when it reaches 2026. So that's why they're keeping it one name ahead, or 1 year ahead, by naming it 26. If you're in the sports video game world, you know that Madden names it 1 year ahead. So this year we're going to get Madden 26, even though releases in August of this year. Same thing goes with car manufacturers. You're going to get the 2026 Ford model whatever, and it's going to be something that releases in 2025. And then when it comes to the naming schemes of these iPhones and different and future products, I think they're actually going to take the same approach moving forward. So it's no longer going to be, the iPhone 17. I do believe Apple's going to stick for this next upcoming year here in September with the iPhone 17 lineup, but then after that, they're going to remove the number completely and just go with iPhone, iPhone Air, because that's the new iPhone we're going to be getting, iPhone Pro, and then iPhone Ultra or iPhone Max. So that's going to be the new naming structure of the iPhones moving forward, and that same approach will come down to all the different devices, because if you start to think about it and look at all the different hardware products that they have, it does get very confusing, especially when you get into the iPad lineup. That iPad lineup is one of the more confusing lineups that I've ever seen, because you have the iPad 11th generation, and then in parentheses A16, then you have the iPad mini, and then in parentheses A17, because it's letting you know what chipset is in there. Then you have the M3 iPad Air 11, the M3 iPad Air 13, the M4 iPad Pro 11, M4 iPad Pro 13, so that things start to get very confusing and you don't understand what's going on. So I do think Apple's going to take a similar approach to kind of make everything a little easier to understand. And again, this is for the average consumer. People watching this channel are probably a little bit more in tune with what the naming structure means. Maybe it makes a little bit more sense because they've been following it for years and years. But for the normal person, they just want to be able to call it their watch. They want to be calling it their iPhone. And again, this also comes down to how that curve of change is kind of flattened a little bit. Now that all iPhones kind of remain year after year the same, and it takes 3, 4, 5, 6 years to really see a difference from a hardware standpoint, this just kind of helps out from that standpoint, because if somebody has maybe an iPhone 17 and they're looking at an iPhone 16, for the most part, they're going to work exactly the same and they're going to be just as powerful as one another. So now they're just going to be called iPhones without the number at the end of it. So let me know again with a comment. What do you guys think of this naming structure? Do you think it's important? Do you think it's Apple just blowing smoke to kind of distract us from what's coming later on? And again, this to me pretty much confirms that we're getting a complete rebrand of what the UI is going to look like on all of our operating systems. And now in other news, to kind of pivot away from WWDC and this whole crazy naming thing, that HomePad that people have been talking about for the last year should be coming out later this year. We did get reports that Apple is working on something codenamed HomePad, and it's reportedly launching later this year, and it features a 7-inch display with probably some sort of HomePod-like structure attached to it that does have a speaker that will be created and work as your home hub when it comes to using all your smart home devices. So again, if you guys have seen things like the recipe catalog inside of the News Plus application, that looks like something that belongs on some sort of HomePad screen, because again, something that belongs in your kitchen, something that's easy to navigate, some sort of iPad-like kind of interface that makes it easy to use with the buttons being very big, and again with that translucent design that we're seeing across some of the applications already with iOS 18. But I for one am excited to see a HomePod or a HomePad in the office or in the room or in the house to really have this central hub to control everything, because yes, right now, while albeit everything I can control from my phone and just reach out of my pocket, it seems kind of easy to just go to a pad on a wall or go somewhere in the kitchen or somewhere in the living room and just kind of control everything, turn everything on, or even just use your voice assistant, which hopefully we'll get a little bit smarter here with WWDC, to be able to control and automate your entire home from a smart home perspective. So that's something that I'm very excited for. And then for all you tvOS as well as Apple TV lovers, we should be getting a new revamped Apple TV later this year as well, both from a hardware perspective, and then of course we're going to get tvOS 26, and we'll see exactly what that looks like from a software perspective. But in terms of what we're going to get with a 4K, in terms of what we're planning on getting with an Apple TV 4K refresh, it should bring the A17 Pro chip or maybe even the A18 chip to allow for Apple Intelligence to be used on that Apple TV itself. And also it's rumored that Apple's working on making this a little bit more of a gaming device, which already, if you guys are into casual gaming, something that's easy, something that's fun, especially if you have a young child and you want to kind of ease them into gaming, now that you can pair a game controller to your Apple TV, Apple Arcade, and Apple TV together for $6 a month is a great little kind of casual gaming device to play with your family, to kind of pass some time, and it works extremely well. So I think Apple doubling down on that could be something beneficial that could take some market share away from some of the other gaming platforms. Now again, this isn't going to be an esports console, this isn't going to be for the high-level gamer, but for some casual gaming, for some fun kind of things to replace board games, I think this could be a fun little addition to the Apple TV. It looks like Apple might be working on a first-party game controller as well that could be packaged in some sort of Apple TV 4K bundle moving forward, but let's see exactly what that looks like. And then in terms of some other hardware issues or some other hardware things that could be added to an Apple TV, we could maybe get a built-in Face ID camera or FaceTime camera for those FaceTime calls that you can now use continuity camera for. That would be a great addition. A USB-C port could be added to add an external camera or maybe some other external I/O that you want to add with adapters and dongles. We will be getting Apple's newest and in-house built Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chip, which should be great for, again, all these magic ecosystem moments that we get with Apple. But let me know in the comment down below as well if an Apple TV 4K update is what you're looking for, because I definitely want one, and I think it's one of Apple's most underrated products in their entire lineup. And then last but not least, a little tidbit for us iPad users and iPad lovers. Apple has kind of revitalized and revamped their iPad repair program, so if you do need to self-repair your iPad and repairability is a thing for you, you can now repair it with first-party parts directly from Apple. Now the price points are probably going to be a little expensive compared to a third-party piece of hardware or a third-party maybe glass replacement or screen replacement, but just know that Apple now has all the resources and tools that you can get directly from Apple to help with repairability on your iPad. So if you need some Apple official parts, some diagnostic tools, or again some sort of repair kit, you can just go directly through Apple, purchase a new display or purchase a new rear chassis or maybe a new battery. You'll be good to go to replace things on your iPad. I've never actually opened up an iPad before. I used to repair old iPhones back in the day, but let's see if maybe we take an iPad apart to kind of test this theory out and see if it's worth messing with. But I don't know if I could trust myself with a 5.1mm thin iPad Pro. But that'll just about do for this Friday 5 episode, everybody. Let me know in the comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, but I definitely want to understand and see what people's sentiment is on this new renaming of iOS, going from 18, skipping everything and going straight to 26. I think it wouldn't be as weird if they did it on a 10-year or maybe even a 5-year, but the fact that they're randomly doing it kind of in the middle where we're skipping, it just seems like Apple's skipping a bunch of things to go directly to 26, 30, or maybe if they did it last year, it would have made a little bit more sense, at least visually and how it sounds. I, for one, was definitely a little taken aback at first in terms of why are they doing this? It doesn't make any sense. But at the end of the day, Apple's gonna Apple, and everybody will just get used to it, and we'll see exactly how that goes. But that'll do it, everybody. If you made it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end. And if you want to watch more videos like this one, definitely check out one of these videos right here. And until next time, I'm Fernando. Peace, everybody.